what we say injured myocardium, not infarcted myocardium, injured myocardium is slow, which the opposing forces have already died out. So we have an increased ventricular activation time due to the slow conduction and an increased amplitude of R wave. Slope elevation of ST segment, you can see here there is some ST segment here, and tall widened T waves. We should not mistake with the tall peaked narrow based hyperkalemic T waves. This is a tall widened T waves which can be seen in the hyperacute phase. This hyperacute phase stays for about an hour or two, that's all, and later it goes to the acute phase, which we all see, which can last for about 6 to 8 hours, in which we have that classical MI ST elevation MI, in which we see the ST elevation which we see here in this ECG leads, the ST elevation and the reciprocal depression in the other leads. This is called as acute phase, in which we will have to intervene either pharmacologically or the PCI depending upon the clinical situation and availability. Third is the healing phase. After say 8 to 12 hours, when the infarction is complete, there was no treatment, the vessel is blocked, the myocardium is dying, which non-salvageable or partially salvageable. Here we see the ST elevation returning to the baseline, in which if you see this ST elevation is high going up. In this phase it is coming down to the baseline. Q wave starts appearing here, that shows a dead myocardium and a deep T wave inversion here. This is a healing phase. Third is a chronic phase, in we see most of the patient had a history of MI few months back, few years back. The scar has healed, patient has survived in spite of you or in spite of me, and the ECG has shown, and a surgeon or somebody sends it for you for a opinion. Here we see a ST elevation which has almost returned to normal, which is a QS pattern. There is no R because the myocardium is dead, there is no excitable tissue, only a scar is there which is having no electrical activity. So a big Q is there, and the T wave may be inverted or upright. This is what we call as in healed MI. These are the ECG changes in the phases of MI. So this cartoon shows that phases in which from normal to ischemia, which Dr. Narsim showed, the ST elevation, T wave inversion, and here the full-blown ST elevation, then the healing phases which are seen here. Then coming to the MI ECG in LBBB. What happens this MI ECG in LBBB? We all know LBBB, left bundle branch block, it interferes with the QRS conduction. Hence we have a diagnostic dilemma. So is all LBBs MI? No. If the patient has typical symptoms of MI, he's got the risk factors, then he has a new onset LBBB. If he has a ECG previously done which is normal, and now the ECG done shows LBBB, probably he has an MI. So how do you diagnose an MI in LBBB? There is a Garbosa criteria, which he has given 3 criteria, and the points are given. Number 1 is ST elevation more than 1 millimeter in a lead with an upward concordant QRS complex. This has 5 points. And ST depression more than 1 millimeters in lead V1, V2, V3, which is given 3 points. ST elevation more than 5 millimeters in a lead with downward discordant complex, 2 points. If the patient has more than 3 points, there is a 90% specificity of an ST EMI. Just to show the difference between LBBB with MI and normal LBBB without MI, you see here this is an LBBB QRS pattern, both are same, but here the T wave is upright, ST is elevated. Here the T wave is inverted. Here if you have a discordant QRS and ST segment, you have a QRS here, and the ST elevation is almost 2.5 millimeters here. Here the ST elevation is not much. So this is how you differentiate LBBB, new onset LBBB. I keep on stressing a new onset LBBB in acute MI. In chronic MI, in a chronic LBBB, diagnosing MI is little difficult. So next, coming to the localization of MI, which my colleague has already talked, Narsim has already talked elaborately, which I'll skip for the want of time. And this chart shows the same thing, in which extensive anterior, sorry? Yeah. This show the where area which we have seen, which we have to see, in which Narsim has shown you already one AVL, V5, V6 shows the lateral wall, the inferior wall is shown by 2, 3 AVF, and anterocephalus is by V1 to V4. I think this makes very simplified the where we have to see for the ischemic changes. No, I'll come to that, sir. I think once we finish, I'll come to that. V1, V2 stands for the anterior anteroseptal, which I am talking here. I'll come to that. Extensive anterior wall shows 1 AVL and V1 to V6, anteroseptal V1 to V4, anterolateral has my colleague Narsim already told, high lateral is 1 AVL, V4 to V6, apical or low lateral V5 to V6, and inferior is 2, 3 AVF. So once we have known, so well, is this so easy? Am I diagnosing? Well, it's not so. Sometimes we might miss certain things. Something called posterior wall MI, which a doctor has already talked, and the right ventricular MI. Posterior wall MI, as my colleague was telling, ECG changes are seen in precordial leads V1 to V3, but are the mirror images. When I said the previous slide, anteroseptal, you have a classical Q wave with the ST elevation. Here you have a mirror image, ulta. You can see it from the, you have a tall R wave, you see a pathological R wave, which signifies a Q wave in an septal MI, which is a mirror image. And RS ratio, which is normally, as my friend said, R is a small r in a V1, V2 normally. Here posterior will have R by S ratio more than 1. So you have a tall R wave signifying a mirror image of a Q wave. And a hyperacute ST changes in which ST depression V1 to V3, that is ST will be depressed on the contrary to the ST elevation in a septal MI. And upright T wave, which shows which is a mirror image of inverted T waves. True posterior MI is often and almost always associated with the inferior wall MI. So when you have a patient with inferior wall MI and unexplained hemodynamic collapse, always look for this true posterior MI. This ECG shows that, which I showed. I'll show it again. This is a tall R wave in V1, V2, which is a mirror image of a Q wave on an anteroseptal MI. Then you have a ST depression here, which you have a, if you invert it, it would have been a ST elevation of a septal MI, and a T wave upright here, which is again a mirror image of an inverted T wave of a septal MI. This you can see is associated with ST elevation 2, 3 AVF, invariable association with an inferior wall MI. That's a true posterior wall MI, and as doctor has pointed out, it is a misnomer because there is no true posterior in cardiac. If you ask an anatomist, he would don't agree with me because there is no true posterior in the cardia. This is just a ECG normer, and I don't know how it has come into picture, but it serves a purpose very well. Coming to the second, right ventricular MI, and it is seen only with the proximal right coronary occlusion, and of course, it's a continuum of an inferior wall MI. ECG findings require additional leads in the chest, V1 to V6 on the right side to diagnose. ST segment elevation in V3R, V6R indicative of a right ventricular injury, and ST elevation of more than 1 millimeter in V4R, which is supposed to be specific for a RV MI. And of course, it is associated with a classic inferior wall MI. I'll just show this cartoon here, in which leads are kept on the right side. The same position on the right side. You see here, V1R, V2R, see the ST elevation in V4R. It's more than 1 millimeter. So you have a diagnosis of a right ventricular MI. Why should we diagnose right ventricular MI in inferior wall MI? If we have a classical inferior wall MI here, why bother about right ventricular MI? Because isolated inferior wall MI, the mortality is less, morbidity is less. But if it is associated with the right ventricular MI, the mortality jumps to 55 to 60%. It's a very high mortality rate, and the management differs. Management differs in the sense we'll have to, if the patient has shock and if the patient is hemodynamically compromised, we might have to give him IV fluids rather than inotropes. Inotropes might kill this patient, leading to, because he's already a big ischemic zone. And if you give the inotropes, it might land up into arrhythmias and kill him. Whereas the treatment of choice, you load him with fluids, increase the blood pressure, increase the right ventricular preload, and bring the blood pressure to normal. So this is what I have talked about. The ECG has a diagnosis. But will ECG serve as a prognostic guide in MI? Yes, it does. If we have an extensive infarction, say a big anterior wall infarction, 1 AVL, V1 to V6, the prognosis is very bad. Multiple infarctions, patient has an old inferior, he was all right, suddenly he comes with one more chest pain, you diagnose an anterior wall MI, again, the prognosis is not very rosy. Bundle branch box, patient has LBBB, RBBB, the prognosis is not good, but LBBB has got a worse prognosis than an RBBB. Ventricular rhythm, my colleague Yusuf talked already about the ventricular rhythm. If the patient has ventricular PVCs, then the prognosis is very not good. The more the number of PVCs, if they occur in bigeminal rhythm, couplets, triplets, the worse is the prognosis. AV blocks, we all know inferior wall can be associated with AV blocks. It can revert on its own or might require a pacemaker for some time and reverts on its own. But a AV block occurring with an anterior wall has got an ominous sign, because it almost always signifies the death of the bundle of His and AV node. Of course, anterior wall infarction is again got ominous sign. You can see this ECG here. I think most of us who have done MDs earlier will remember it was our professors to show these ECGs and show it as a C. This ECG has got a tombstone appearance. That means the sign is ominous. But in nowadays, for an interventional cardiologist, it looks like an inflated balloon. This candidate is for percutaneous intervention, and you take him to the lab and salvage him. So these are some of the scores which I just want to mention, and I don't want to go in detail. This is for connoisseurs of ECG, might be like Dr. JP or Lokhandwala who comes tomorrow. They might be knowing this. These are the scores. Aldrich score, which gives us the extent of MI. Anderson-Wilkins score gives us the acuteness of MI. And Sklarowski-Birnbaum grade gives us the severity of MI. People who are interested can read it in Marriott's textbook of cardiology. So sometimes, most of the time, we get an ECG from general practitioners or surgeons, or most of the time anesthetist. QAVIN 3, kindly evaluate. So QAVIN lead 3, what is the significance? Is suggestive of an inferior wall MI only if it is associated and the Q is at least one small square, that is 0.04 seconds. If it's associated with a Q of at least 0.20 seconds in AVF, or Q of any duration in lead 2, or R in lead 3 must be must be at least 5 millimeters unless the Q is more than 2.5 millimeters. And very important is upright PV in lead 3, because sometimes some arrhythmias, atrial arrhythmias, can lead to a Q in lead 3 with an inverted P waves. If you have that, it's most of the time it's not a infarction, but it's an arrhythmia which has to be investigated. So apart from this classical signs of MI, there are some certain subtle signs which might not occur in many patients, but this has to be kept in mind to diagnose an MI. Those are poor R wave progression, RS changes in the precordial leads, acute frontal axis right axis deviation, a new left axis deviation LBB which I have already touched, or an initial or terminal QRS notching. This might be the subtle signs of MI which might be missed in a casual reading of an ECG. So the caveats in this ECG diagnosis of myocardial infarction: MI might not lead to ST elevation in all conditions, like LCX occlusion, in which I showed the posterior wall, there is no ST elevation, there is an ST depression, and still it's a myocardial infarction. Not all ST elevations are due to MI, because there are differential diagnoses. For want of time, I'm not going to touch it. That is early repolarization syndrome, WPW syndrome, or connective tissue diseases, or many conditions in which there are pericarditis, all where this ST elevation might be there, but they are not all MI. Old LBBB limits the usefulness of ECG in AMI. So with this, I thank you for the patient hearing.
I now request Dr. H. Prabhakar, Chief Interventional Cardiologist, FMMC, to hand over a certificate of appreciation to Dr. Rajesh Bhatt. Thank you, sir. Next, we have a talk by Dr. Tom Devasya, Interventional Cardiologist from KMC Manipal. He will be speaking on reperfusion after myocardial infarction. We have Dr. Tom Devasya.
Good evening, and regards to all of you from KMC Manipal. I thank Dr. Prabhakar for giving me this opportunity to spend some time with you. We'll discuss about reperfusion in MI. As we all know, a total occlusion of the culprit artery leads to an ST elevation MI, and a subtotal occlusion with thrombus occluding, causing subocclusive or partial occlusion of the lumen, produces a non-ST elevation MI. Once an MI is diagnosed, we try to reperfuse the ischemic myocardium either by means of a thrombolysis or by a PCI. So once this is done, we have to assess our reperfusion, whether it was successful or not. So how do we do this? During PCI, it's relatively easy because we do have an angiographic blushing and we can have a TIMI scoring system, and based on the TIMI 3 flow, we say a successful reperfusion. But then sometimes we thrombolyze and then we have to assess how successful we were. How do we do that? Most importantly, the symptoms. The patient's symptom, by whatever reperfusion strategy we follow, should come down by at least 50%. Most often it's angina, and the angina severity on a scale of 0 to 10 should come down by at least 50%. Then we should have evidence to prove that what the patient tells us is correct and for future documentation. So we take a repeat ECG. Simple test. We have ST resolution. I'll come to that once again. T wave changes and QRS abnormalities. To assess this, let's try to recap the evolutionary changes that happens in an ECG during an MI. First, there is the hyperacute T wave or the giant positive T waves, which reflects acute ischemia. Then the ST segment goes up, which produces the injury. Then there is Q wave, slow development of T wave inversions, and the R wave height may come down. Then the ST settles, the T wave inversion becomes more deep, the Q wave becomes really prominent. Sometimes when a large amount of myocardium is infarcted, you have QS wave and then T inversion, which may persist for some more time. Then the T inversion may become normalized with only QS wave remaining there. And sometimes if the perfusion is not good or that the territory is fully infarcted, the negative remodeling may cause a persistent ST elevation, which can lead on to LV aneurysm. As far as the time is concerned, from 0 over, which is the time of onset of the pain or the MI, at 4 hours the ST shift, 6 hours ST and Q, 12 to 24 hours ST settles down, T inverts, Q is there, 9 to 6 hours ST is nearly normal, 2 weeks Q is there, T is inverted, and 6 weeks again T is inverted and becomes flattened. My medicine postgraduate told me the mnemonic nasty loser QT to show the ECG evolution of MI. The N stands for the normal ECG, then the ST elevation is there, then there is loss of R wave, and then there is Q waves and T wave inversions. ST resolution, how do we assess it? Basically, we want 50% ST resolution. So we can go by a single lead criteria with the maximum ST elevation what was there when the patient was first identified with the height of chest pain, or you can have a sum of ST elevation with a total ST score identification and see whether the total ST score has come down by 50%. Also, the reciprocal changes that had come due to ST depression, they also should resolve. Which is the reference points we compare it with. It is usually the first ECG, that is the maximum ST segment elevation ECG, but we can compare with either of those. The SN2 trial was there, comparing 13,100 patients. ST resolution at 24 to 36 hours relative to the enrollment was done. The amount of ST elevation was measured at 20 milliseconds after the J point with the use of a handheld caliper. The sum of the ST elevation was measured from lead 1 AVL V1 to V6 for anterior MI and 2, 3 AVF V5 and V6 for inferior MI. JACC 1994, they also recommended that early T wave inversion within 24 hours after thrombolytic therapy or PCI predicts a better coronary perfusion, almost a TIMI 3 flow, and it correlated well with clinical and angiographic study. Garbosa in American Heart Journal 2000 said that negative T waves shortly after an ST elevation MI is a good marker for improved survival rate. That means the time from an acute ST elevation to the weeks after T inversion without the formation of Q and ST drift is bypassed, and we achieve a very good myocardial flow early on. Other importance of early T wave inversions: most of the times there is a higher incidence of TIMI3 flow, what we are all striving for once we try to reperfuse. There is a better ejection fraction, lesser myocardial damage, and a lower incidence of positive late potentials, which probably leads to reduced incidence of post-MIVT, a higher risk of reinfarction or recurrent ischemia. And enzyme wise, as we all know, there would be abrupt CPK rise within 12 hours instead of the usual 12 to 24 hours peak. This is just a sample ECG. We know that any medicine postgraduates, what MI is it? Yes, there is ST elevation in V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6, 1 and AVL. Acute extensive anterior wall MI, yes. So once it is diagnosed, you try to reperfuse, and after reperfusion, this is a ECG. We can see that the ST has settled, ST score, total ST score has come down, and the T wave has inverted. We assume this patient to be symptom free and have a good reperfusion with probable TIMI3 flow on angiogram. So that's the assessment. Just a small note on reperfusion arrhythmias. Once reperfused, during the first 24 hours, patients are prone for reperfusion arrhythmias. The common ones are sinus bradycardia and sinus tachycardia, but very often we do not worry about them too much. Sometimes there is this accelerated idioventricular rhythm and may lead to confusion. Let's try to see this ECG. Medicine postgraduates, what's your diagnosis? AIVR. Can you tell me one or two findings that can suggest the origin as ventricular on ECG?